What's going on, adventurers? I hope everybody is well, happy, healthy, getting to spend some time outside, doing some cool outdoor adventure stuff now that warm weather is finally here. How the hell is it June already? I have no idea. This year is just flying by, and man, in Texas, and I'm sure a lot of the country, it's been the same way. We've been covered up with rain almost every single day for the month of May. There were so many things I planned. Turkey hunts, just time to get out to the lease and do some work, time to go camping, hiking, things that all pretty much got shot down because of rain. And these were all things that, I guess I'm going to be a fair weather hunter, fair weather adventurer, things that weren't huge priorities of mine. That it was time to, instead of going out and doing an adventure, we can go work on gear, do something else. But all that to say, I was excited to finally get out and do something very adventurous and something that was actually very new to me. So I recently, yesterday, just participated in my first long-range shooting sniper match style competition. So I'm brand new to competition. So my background is primarily as a hunter, but I know I've spent almost a disproportionate amount of time on this podcast talking about my hunting adventures, because really there's so much more that I like doing: camping, hiking, shooting, kayaking. I even got a mountain bike that I use a little bit, and I need to use, frankly, quite a bit more. But competition shooting is something that I had never really tried and something that I wanted to get into. So I've been interested in long-range shooting. It was Rex Tabor and his YouTube series and his class that got me fired up and interested about it. I'm sure there were other things before that probably, like a lot of other people, a lot of these kind of sniper movies got me interested in it and excited about it. But instead of it just being a cool Hollywood thing, I saw all the things wrong with it, and I wanted to learn how to do it for myself. And then Rex Tabor, his class, and all that stuff got me excited about long-range shooting. And it's just kind of been something that I've messed around with. I have a video where I shot a beer can at 600 yards. It was kind of a cool, almost like trick shot type of thing that I did. I got my buddy sighted in out to 1,000 yards with his 6.5 Creedmoor after I had done it. So it's something that I wanted to do it to prove it to myself and others, but was never serious about the competitive aspect of it. And I found that it's funny how these two worlds, you think, oh, gun people, but there's actually so many different worlds of gun people. Even in this world, we're just talking about rifle people. We're not even really talking about handguns or shotguns, which can easily turn into trap and skeet and clay and all those sort of sports. But ultimately, there are people who like the kind of tactical games side of things and people who like the hunting and practical side of things. And there's a little bit of crossover, but it's actually shocking how much there are people who are shooters who don't hunt and hunters that don't shoot. I both mean categorically, but I also mean in types of skill sets. So there are people who have super heavy rifles and can shoot the head off a match and are super, super accurate, but you put them out in the woods after a game and they just can't read sign, can't look for animals. They can shoot really well, but they just don't know their way around the woods. Likewise, there are a whole lot of hunters who can't shoot. Or they know one shot. They know 70 to 120 yards, hit a pie plate on a white-tailed deer, and that's all they can do. And they're decent hunters as long as it's basically that one thing that's very kind of contrived and rehearsed. As long as they're doing that exact thing, they can do it very well. But there's not actually a whole ton of crossover, at least kind of in Middle America and in the East. The West, it's a little bit different, of people who are both long-range shooters and also hunters. So because this channel is about just adventure in general, shooting and hunting are both natural parts of that for me. And I want to be a hybrid. I want to merge those together. And to me, competition is a good way to focus on improving my ability to shoot, give me some incentive to not just get it done, not just to be practical, but to actually get better and to get excited about this stuff in the off season when I can't be shooting at game. So brand new to this competition stuff. I did shoot one long range. Well, it wasn't even really a long range match before. It's the only shooting match I've done before this one. It was called a poker chip match. Originally, it was shooting at a poker chip at 200 yards. Now it's just a sticky circle, basically just a printed sticker that's the same size as a poker chip. So I think 1 7/8 inches or maybe 2 inches at 200 yards. But it's not really a tactical style match. It's not really long range. It's one distance, 200 yards, which the wind just barely starts to come into play, depending on your caliber. At that distance, you do have to have good fundamentals. You do have to be a good marksman, but there's one distance and then you just do it 40 times. So you're just rewarded on how consistent you can be accurate, not how you can adapt to different conditions, different target sizes, different distances. This is the first match that's truly kind of a sniper style match, different size targets, different distances, real world conditions that I've ever actually done. And it seems like all of these shooting matches, they kind of have to come up with a fun theme or a fun name for the match. So like I mentioned, that other one was a poker chip shoot. This one was the belly flop, and it was called that because it was all prone shooting. So we were all on a deck, laying on our bellies, shooting from bipods out at several distances. From starting at 500 was the closest target, out to 1,000 was the furthest target. But it was just called that because it was all prone, so it kind of let people know how they'd be shooting. It's not a true PRS style match where you're running around, setting up on different barricades. This is basically just a training facility that has a long range, and they wanted to build an event based on the tower that they had and all the targets that they had out there. So it was the belly flop. And funny enough, this last week we hired 2 new coworkers, and so Friday night we went out for kind of a new employee happy hour that went a little long, and so going out drinking the night before a match probably is not the best idea. So I did do that, but we did cut it early. I think I probably got home by about 9:30, maybe 10 p.m., and was in bed probably by 11:30 or midnight. But I just have this weird thing where I just can't sleep well before a hunt. And apparently it applies to a match as well. I don't know if it's nerves, if it's just I'm waking up really early, so I'm not wanting to miss my alarm, so I'm paranoid about that, or if I'm just excited for the event. It's probably a hybrid of all of them. But the range opened, the facility opened at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was about 45 minutes or an hour away from me. So I wanted to just get up. My plan was just to get up at 6, pack all my gear, check my stuff, shower, get ready, and then be on the way before 7. And I don't know what it was, but I probably woke up at about 4:15, 4:30 and just couldn't sleep. I was thinking about the match, got all excited. I was ready to go, and I realized at that point, well, I don't want to try to go to sleep now and risk missing it, or I don't know, just not being mentally wide awake. So I stayed up, grabbed some coffee, which was also another thought that occurred to me. I'm a habitual coffee drinker. I rely on it. It's definitely an addiction. It's something I need and I enjoy in my life. If I'm well rested, I would say a 1 day or a 1 cup of coffee day is kind of the minimum for me. 2 cups is probably a little bit more common. I don't know, probably about 50-50 for me. But I woke up, had the 1 required cup, and then I thought, well, I'm going to a long-range shooting match. I really don't want to be jittery if I'm trying to be as stable as possible shooting at 1,000 yards. So I had to kind of think about that. But ultimately I decided, well, I don't think I'd be that jittery, and I would rather risk being a little bit jittery than being groggy and not mentally all there. So went ahead and just drank the 2nd cup of coffee really fast. I figured that way it'd be in my system for a little while and I'm not just immediately on top of both. So went out, packed up my stuff, headed out. Of course, stopped by Chick-fil-A for breakfast because Texas, that's just what you do, right? Was headed out, but the whole time it was raining. It had started raining close to midnight when I went to bed, and this just continues the train of ridiculous rain that we've had in Texas. So I was a little bit worried about it. I had first checked to make sure they hadn't canceled the match, and they hadn't. But I figured it was kind of going to be a mud fest, so I made sure to bring long pants and good boots. I figured we were probably just going to be out in a cow pasture somewhere, and that's exactly what it was. So got out there. It was very muddy, but the shooting facility was covered. So the mud may have been a little bit of an inconvenience in some conditions, but ultimately it wasn't really going to be a huge issue in terms of running around and shooting in the mud. But Fortunately, the rain let up right before I got there. So that was a change for the better. So I got to the range, checked in with the range officer. Seemed like a really nice guy. A lot of other people were already there. I could tell not everybody was there yet. I was probably about in the middle of the pack in terms of people showing up earlier, right as it started. Fortunately for anybody who showed up early, they did have a bench set up that you could check the zero on your rifle. And I was very, very glad that I did that because I went, sat on the bench. I didn't see my impact, and it was just at 100 yards. And so when I didn't see my impact on paper at 100 yards, I had a little mini freak out. I was like, what's going on? What is happening? Did somehow my scope get banged? Did I grab the wrong ammo? Because I have a 130 grain and 140 grain ELD match. The 140 is factory, but the 130 I'm loading and is quite different. So I'm like, maybe I grabbed the wrong ammo. So I had originally zeroed my rifle to the 130 because that's what I'm hand loading for, but I didn't have my dope all the way out to 1,000, so I was going to use up the last of my factory 140 for this match. What I had realized was when I had zeroed for the 130, I had set my zero a full turn off where I had set it for the 140. So I knew I was going to be a couple clicks different. At 100 yards, they should probably be about an inch different. So for me, about 3 clicks different. And when I wasn't even seeing the hit, I was really, really nervous. And then I figured out, oh, shoot, I'm just a turn off. So loosened up my cap, spun it all the way back down to the bottom zero, fired a test shot, saw it was an inch high, made sense, gave it the 3 clicks. That was the difference between my 130 and my 140. And then boom, right on the money. All that to say, I am very glad that there was a way that I could test my rifle at the actual range before the competition began. That was a saving grace for me. So it was great that I got that check on my zero. I saw a lot of other people did the same thing, but not everybody. And I thought that was a little bit weird. If you have a chance to check your rifle, unless you just have somehow infinite amount of confidence, why would you not check it? Why would you not just go punch one round in paper? Or maybe other people did it and it was just so quick I never even saw it, but it seemed like based on the number of people there, which was probably about 30 people total, that not everybody had gone through the 100-yard check. So to me, why would you not? So after the 100-yard check range, we all kind of gathered together. They went through a safety briefing, and they didn't focus too much on safety. It was just the basics. Keep your gun pointed down range, keep your bolt open unless you're actually shooting. The one thing that did change a little bit from my expectations is they basically said, never have a mag in your gun till you're actually laying prone with your gun ready to shoot. So they were going to have one on-deck shooter who was getting ready while the other person was shooting. So don't have a mag in your gun till they call you up and you're saying shooter ready. Then you put the mag in your gun. And then, of course, always keep your bolt back. That's just the easiest way on a bolt gun to see that the gun is safe and unloaded. So all that made sense. Then they went through just a general kind of layout of how the event was going to work. So we were broken up into squads. There was one squad that pretty much had all the Magnum shooters together. So 300 Win Mag, 338, anything that somebody had that was basically a long action or a Magnum rifle all went into that class. And then the majority of people who were all short action, non-Magnum guns were broken up into 2 different other squads. The squads were all in the same divisions. The squads were just more broken up just so that they could kind of have some sort of rotation through the match. So then they kind of explained that we were going to have one person shooting while one person was on deck and the other person was going to be kind of getting ready. So there was room for 3 people in each section of the platform for each squad. And with that, somebody would shoot. The spotters would call hit, no hit, score it accordingly. Then they'd move on to the next person. So they'd be up while somebody started getting ready to fill the on-deck spot. So that's how it was going to work. And then they were going to do that at one distance. Then you all pick up and move, sit somewhere else. Then you shoot another distance. And so they did it so you're never shooting back to back at more than one distance. And you're always changing distance between them. And they made sure to randomize the distances so that you were never consistently working out one step at a time or working in one step at a time, because that would be a little bit not unfair, because if everybody was doing it in the same order, it'd be fair, but it would kind of help you to coach along the distances instead of knowing the distances and dialing specifically for them. That way, every time you would pick up all your gear, set it back down again, and dial a completely new firing solution. So like my squad started at 700, then we went to 5, then we went to 6 actually, then I think we went to 9, then 8, then 1,000. So they made a point to mix it up quite a bit. So you're not just everybody start at 5 and then work up 6, 7, 8, 1,000. It was somewhat randomized so that you actually had to do the entire process every single time for a different distance. So that was the general structure of the range and the way they were going to score it. So that was a little bit interesting. We knew the distances, but we did not know the size of the targets. So looking at it, they basically had, for every distance, they had 4 different scoreable targets. They had a few other targets out there that they just used for normal just training at this range. And so they had all the targets that you were shooting for this event had a different shape or a different color. So you could either call out the shape or the color that you intended to shoot, and you had to call your shot. So there was no chance that you would aim at one and luck out by hitting another one. You had to call your shot. And these targets had different point values. So the biggest one was always a full-size torso IPSC target, and that was always worth 1 point. So it's the biggest one, it's the easiest one to hit, basically a man-sized torso at whatever range. That was always 1 point. Then they had a smaller target that was 2 points, a very small target that was 3 points, and then the smallest target was always sub-MOA. So at 500 yards, it was under 5 inches. At 1,000 yards, it was under 10 inches. And I think at 1,000, it was significantly under. I think it was maybe a 8-inch plate at 1,000. Nobody actually hit the smallest one because there were some very, very small targets at some long distances. So they had different point values. So you could either shoot a 1-pointer or a 4-pointer every time. But obviously, if you missed, you got 0 points. So that was generally how it was going to be structured. And then they announced that there was going to be a 1,000-yard cold bore shot at the very beginning of the match. And it's not a true cold bore because we had zeroed our rifles, but nobody had shot that distance that day. So for all practical purposes, it was a cold bore. And I thought that was really cool because it was a chance to be realistic to a hunting or sniper scenario of there's a target way out there. Do I know my conditions? Do I know my dope? And can I hit it? And it proved very difficult. Very few people did. It was a steel armadillo. It was an armadillo or a hog, some critter out there at 1,000 yards. And I shot just over the back of it. A lot of people also shot just over the back of it. And I had realized that even though I felt good about my dope, it was taken at a very different place. So here we were low elevation, probably about 500 foot elevation, whereas when I shot my rifle at my hunting lease, I'm closer to 2,000 feet, and it was incredibly humid because it had just been raining that day. So the air was thick and heavy and moist versus out at my lease, it's very, very dry western air. And the one thing that really threw me, I think the most, was we weren't shooting off of level ground or out of the back of a truck. We were shooting off of a 30-foot tower. And so all my dope was based on level shooting, not compensating for the angle. And so that's why, even though my dope I knew was right per distance, it was not right for the angle. So that's why I shot right over the back of this thing. So the match started with that 1,000-yard cold bore for everybody. And I think about 5 or 6 people hit it, but most people did not. Most people were thrown off by the size of the target, the distance of the target, the angle, something. I know what it was for me, but it was probably a different problem for most people. So we went from there immediately into the first stage, and that is where I screwed something up. We immediately went to the next distance, and for my squad, it was 700, and that's where I screwed up big time. So pointed my scope down at the line of targets at 700 yards, looked at them, saw that the yellow was the big torso. Then there was, I don't remember the next one, we'll just say it was blue. It was still a decent-sized target, and then we'll just say the next one was green. And I'm like, that's one I feel confident that I can hit. So I called out green, pointed my scope, shot, and just whiffed it big time. I didn't even see impact. And I was like, oh no, what did I do? And that's when I just thought, maybe I'm being way too ambitious. Maybe I'm being way too cocky about this whole thing. So I looked, saw that big yellow torso target, the biggest and easiest one out there. And so I called out yellow and shot for that one. And I saw a dirt kick up right above the head of this giant target. And that's when I realized that I had done something really, really stupid. I was shooting with my 1,000-yard dope at 700 yards, so I was feet above my target. When I had transitioned from 1,000 to 700, pointed my scope in the right direction, and I even thought to adjust my parallax, but I did not change my dope. So I quickly looked at my dope card that I have printed up and taped to my rifle, and I realized, I was way the heck off. And so from then, I dialed back down to where I should have been at 700 yards, stayed on the yellow target, called out yellow again, shot, bing, right center mass on the yellow target. So it was good to see that hit, good to see the impact. It meant I had a huge problem that was caused by something stupid, but I solved it. I at least solved the problem. But unfortunately, it meant I only had 1 point for that round. It was not even one of the hardest rounds. Something that was new to me was also shooting under a time limit. So they had a shot timer. So once you got lined up, they would basically just make sure that you were all set up on your mat. They would they would call out your name just to make sure that they were scoring it correctly for the right person. And then once you got ready, they would say, spotter ready. Then you would respond with shooter ready when you were ready. And then you would hear beep, the shot timer go off. And from then you had 60 seconds to make all 3 hits on your 3 different targets. Now I realized throughout the event, I think only one time did somebody not get all their shots off in the time limit. 60 seconds is a lot of time, and I think more people would have benefited from slowing down more than people trying to hurry up. But for me, it was the first time I had shot under a time limit, and so it just added some pressure. And I think that's why I made the stupid mistake, like not dialing, because I was just thinking about, okay, get on that 700-yard target fast, when really I didn't actually have to be that fast. So that was a new experience for me. So then we went on, shot the next stage. I think my group went down to 500. Again, I tried to shoot a small target there. I think I missed the first time, went back to an easier target, the easiest target, the big yellow one. I hit that, and then I went back up to the small target again and hit that. So I think I got maybe 3 points for that round. So it wasn't great, but at least I came off with more points, and I wasn't doing something really stupid that round. So between rounds, obviously, like guys do, I'm standing there looking at everybody else's equipment, seeing what do I have? How does it compare to what everybody else is bringing to this match? You know, do I have too much gun, too little? What's general cost structure of what I have versus what is the norm or average? And saw a lot of stuff that was really good quality equipment. I'm sure on that platform, there was probably $500,000 of equipment that day. Just sitting out there between spotting scopes, tripods, rifles, rifle scopes, custom ammo, all kinds of widgets. Saw a lot of Night Force, saw I think 2 Schmidt & Benders, saw 1 or 2 Valdatas, saw a couple Leupold VX6s, I saw 1 Miopta. I was shooting Leupold LRP. I think I was the only one shooting that optic. Saw several. Vortex was probably the most common thing. I saw several Vortex Razor HD Gen 2s, the big heavy brown one, and several Vipers. And I later noticed that the people shooting the Vortex Vipers, there were only 2 people who had scope problems, and both of them were shooting that same optic. And there was one guy who was sponsored by Sightmark. Well, I assume he was sponsored because he was shooting a Sightmark, wearing a Sightmark hat and t-shirt. So I figured that was the case. Shooting their long-range scope. I think it's called the Latitude. But it was a good mix of optics. There were a few kind of traditional lightweight hunting rifles. Nothing, I don't think there was anything there with a walnut stock. Nothing ultra-traditional. But a few lightweight hunting rifles. A few people who had something like an HS Precision or a Bagara, something like that. There were a few Christensens and a lot of people with various chassis builds. whether that was a custom put together project or something kind of like what I was shooting, the Savage BA Stealth that came from the factory with an MDT chassis. There were a lot of Ruger precision rifles out there too. I think there were 5 or 6 of them between the whole crew. And of course, there was a bunch of custom stuff out there. People shooting Stiller actions or Defiance, just stuff like that was either something they had built or maybe Alamo Precision had built up for them, something like that. And so it was interesting to see the mix. And I would say, looking at my equipment, I was probably just below the middle of the pack in terms of average dollar value. I would say the average that most people had was a $1,200 scope and a $1,000 rifle. That was probably the average, and I was slightly below that. And of course, there were a few people, especially in the Magnum category, that had like a full bull barrel or even a full blank barrel on a sled and a heavyweight chassis and a 35 power scope. There were a few rigs like that, but I wouldn't say it was the norm for this event. I would say me shooting my 6.5 Creedmoor on a chassis build with a 6-20 was very much the norm, right in the middle of the pack with this event. Everybody had a bipod at the event. Some people, it was a sled. A lot of people had a Harris style. I saw a couple other people who were shooting the Magpul like I was. One guy had the Magpul on his rifle, but then was still shooting off of a bag, off of a pack, which I didn't really understand. But all in all, I think equipment-wise, it was a mostly fair match. So I shot through the other stages, and every time I felt like I learned something and I had fun. And as the day warmed up, we started seeing a little bit more wind. It was still humid, very humid, but there was no rain. But the wind was dead still when we first got there. So wind definitely was not an excuse for me missing that 1,000-yard cold bore. It was purely my dope and not taking into account the height of the building that we were standing on top of. But the wind started picking up a little bit during the day, but it was never bad. It was probably a 12 mile an hour breeze at very most, which for North Texas, that's not a lot. That's normal or low wind, I would say, compared to what I'm used to shooting. And the wind was almost a tailwind. I would say it was 7 o'clock most of the day, and then occasional puffs would kind of bring it around to half value, but usually it was a quarter value wind, so I was barely holding any wind at all. So that actually helped, and I think it made it a lot easier, and I was surprised that a lot of people weren't shooting better than they actually were, because I think wind is one of the hardest things about long-range shooting, and it was almost not a factor for the first half of this match. I think there were just so many people who this is a brand new format. Maybe some people had never even shot this distance. There were just enough new things that I think threw people off. So it was kind of nice not having to worry about the wind too much here. But all that to say, I'm going to count it as we got a little bit of a reprieve that day. So shot some of the other stages. I think generally I got better and better as I went, just because I felt a little bit more comfortable with where I was hitting, how I was doing. And I was a little bit more used to the format. It wasn't looking for an animal and movement. It was picking out a square or picking out a shape, yelling out a target color. I was just more familiar with the process. And I had realized that my dope was good, but where I was actually making hits, if I dialed one click under my dope, that was the magic spot for me at this range. And I think that was just purely due to the height of the building about 25 feet up that I was shooting off of, so I had a different angle. So I didn't try to recalculate my dope. I think there were a lot of people who were pulling out their Kestrels or pulling up Straylock on their smartphones, looking at new numbers, realizing, oh, something's wrong. What do I do? I knew my baseline dope was really good. And so I had to just think in terms of, from here, where do I go? And I just said, let me dial one click under. And that seemed to be right. I wish I had figured that out a little bit earlier, but that seemed to be the right solution for me. So I went ahead to shoot all of the other stages. So again, the maximum distance was 1,000. The cold bore was not included. That was a separate 1,000-yard target. There were normal targets at 1,000 yards as well. So we shot at 1,000, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. And those were all of the different stages. And then they added up scores by stage. And then that all added up to a total cumulative score for how you did in the match. And again, they had separated the Magnum shooters out from the non-Magnum shooters. So overall, looking at my scores for the very first match, I actually placed first at 1,000. I was the only one who didn't miss a target at 1,000. Now, I was shooting at some of the low-valued targets at 1,000. I think I first shot the 1-pointer, and then I shot the 2-pointer twice. So that helped me a lot. I placed first at 1,000. I placed first at 900 as well amongst the whole crew. But then my screw-up at 700 really cost me. I placed 16th on that stage. And then at 500, I don't know really what I did. I think I got 2 points on that stage. I think I missed one. I was a little shaken, so I went to the easy target and just pinged it twice for 2 points. So that really cost me. And it was funny that like when I was concentrating more on the harder targets, the longer range stuff, that's where I actually did best. And the stuff that should have been easiest is just where I made simple, careless mistakes. So all in all, I came in 4th in the whole event. And I think for my first match, I'm very happy with that. And I know that I could have shot better. And I think there's a lot of people also who were there who had equipment issues, who had things that they screwed up, simple mistakes that they're going to learn from in the next match. They're not going to make those mistakes, and they're going to be way better. So I don't want to take this as, oh, I did a good job and just come in with a big head and be confident. I know there were things I screwed up and I could have done better. And I think most people also have that. And so I think everybody's going to do significantly better at the next match. So I also want to say congrats. I doubt she's listening, but if she is, Stephanie Russell was the only female at this match, and she pretty much swept it. So she won the non-Magnum division, and she was the second overall, and the overall winner was in the Magnum division. And the overall winner actually didn't miss the whole match and was shooting some massive Magnum on a sled. This is a guy who really knows what he's doing, had nice equipment, and I don't say that to complain. Like, congrats to him, but he dominated everybody in this event. And then Stephanie was next and dominated everybody else after that. So congrats to her, because I think that's really cool that it's not just a boys club, that women are getting involved in this too. Now, she was the only woman there, so it still is mostly a boy club, and I'd like to see more female shooters getting into this. And so after the match, they sent out an after-action report just saying what went well, what did you like, what did you not like, and even on there, it was all but one of you were beat by a woman. How do you feel about that? Do you say congrats to her? Should there be a separate class for women? And I think it's awesome that she did so well, and I don't think there should be a separate class for women, because this isn't like wrestling or other sports where there's a natural advantage to somebody who has a larger stature. It comes down to, do you know your target distance? Do you know how to shoot your rifle? Do you know your basic fundamentals? I think this is one of few sports where men and women actually are equally matched. And in a lot of ways, tendencies that women have, I think, are very intuitive to becoming a long-range shooter, because you need to be relaxed. You need to be gentle. You need to be under control. There is no aspect of long-range shooting where machismo, other than just confidence in your equipment, is ever an advantage. And so I think a lot of guys like shooting, like hunting, like all this stuff, just because of our caveman macho-ness that we like to tap into. But for long-range shooting, being relaxed, being patient, having a gentle touch, being in control, these are all things that I know a lot of women who are naturally good at that perspective. And so I'd love to see more women get into long-range shooting, and I'd love to see more women succeed at it. So all that to say, congrats to her. That's super cool. And then I don't think that there should be different divisions for men and women. I think we should all join in this as a co-ed sport and all enjoy it and just let score be score. It's one of the few sports where it's actually very egalitarian. But I think that's awesome that she did so well. So looking at this match, will I be back? I think they plan on doing another one. I sure hope so, because I plan on coming back. And I hope this turns into a whole series, and I hope that this isn't a once every 6 weeks thing. I hope they do a lot of this, because I want to do it as much as possible. I want to shoot as many of these matches before, I know in the fall, starting in bow season, that's where a lot of my time is going to go. So if I can shoot more of these matches and really enjoy it now, I think that would be so cool. So I never really saw myself as a competitor, but I'm getting into it. The next match I'm going to is going to be another one of those poker chip shoots, which again, very different. You're not dialing for different ranges. You're just picking out one range and just trying to be as consistent as possible. But I think every time you're pulling the trigger and you're thinking about what you're doing, you're making progress. If you're just pulling the trigger and dumping mags and shooting recklessly, yeah, you're not making any progress. You're just burning up powder. But if you're trying to be precise, you're getting in practice, and I think that's good. So yes, I will absolutely be back to this match the next time I do it. So I also have to ask myself, what else did I learn from this match? Either gear-wise, strategy-wise, just general equipment. What did I learn? What do I want to do better for next time? So a couple things that I was thinking about. So I have my little beanbag that I was shooting off of. So I have a whole video where I made one out of a pair of pants filled with kitty litter or aquarium rocks. Then I have another one that's just made out of a wool sock. And for this, I was actually using a factory one. So for me, it just kind of depends on what size bag do I need at the time, determines which one do I use. So everybody there had a rear support bag for their rifle. There may have been somebody who didn't have one, but I thought I saw everybody with one. And I don't know, a weird thing, I was afraid of losing it. I don't know why. I was afraid it was going to get kicked off the edge, or I was going to get called up to the line. I grabbed my rifle and then looked around for my beanbag and couldn't find it. So every time I hooked it on my bipod, and then I realized I would go to deploy my bipod and it would get hung up. And it was a stupid little thing to be concerned about. But I realized I have an extra quick detach sling swivel from an old sling that I don't use anymore. I think I'm going to get that sewn onto my bag. It's got a little strap on it. Get that sewn onto the strap. I wish I could actually sew. I should probably learn to do that, but I'm probably just going to go to a seamstress who hems my pants. Get that sewn onto my bag so I can just push it into one of the quick detach slots on my rifle, one of those flush cups, so that it always is physically attached to my rifle. So I grab it and it comes with. Not that losing it's actually a big deal, but that way it's one less thing that I have to think about. So another thing that I saw is I came in there with my mags fully loaded, and then they said every time you were called up to the line, there were only 3 shots. So they said load 3 rounds in your mag, have your mag sitting out. Or a lot of people were just drop feeding one at a time. I don't like doing that. I like shooting from a mag. That way there's no chance of dropping around or anything like that. So I realized in between stages, I was always pulling loose rounds out of one mag, sticking them in another, and I had a bunch of other loose rounds in my pocket. So what I thought was helping myself out by loading my mags in advance ended up not helping me. So just have ammo in a normal ammo box, and then before each phase, pull it up with the number of shots in that phase, in that round of the competition. So like I mentioned earlier, they had the shot timer, and like I said, only one person ever ran into the time limit, ran into an actual place where they got 2 shots off, and then they heard the 3rd beep before they got this shot. I think the pressure encouraged everybody to shoot fast, but it really wasn't actually an issue. And I never got to see the shot timer. I never saw whether I was ending at 30 seconds or ending at 59 seconds. But I know I never ran into it. Most people never ran into it. And so it's a good reminder. Take my time a little bit more, especially on those ones where I miss one and I'm a little bit flustered. If I feel like I'm right on it, go ahead. If I feel confident, shoot it again. But if I feel a little flustered or I missed or I need to reevaluate, take a second just to relax and think. I think that would be helpful. It's definitely something I learned. The time incentive encouraged me to rush more than I needed to. And then secondly, ammo is definitely something I need to think about. I was almost wondering if we would see full attendance at this event just based on this ammo shortage. But I realized most of these long-range shooter type people, they probably hand load their own ammunition anyway, so it probably didn't affect them too much. And I think that was mostly the case. I think I was one of few people shooting factory ammunition at this event. And for me, that's not necessarily because I prefer factory ammunition. So I had actually loaded up my hand loads based on the 130 grain Hornady ELD match, but I had a lot of the 140. The 140 actually has better BC. I like that round a little bit better, but I couldn't find that bullet when I wanted to load up my own ammunition, and I could find a lot of the 130s. So I realized, well, the 130 is still a very good bullet. It'll give me a little bit better velocity, but worse BC. But I'm dialing anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. So I built up a lot of those 130s, but I still had the 140s, and the 140s are what I had good dope on out to 1,000. I know my 130s are just as accurate, if not more, but I've only ever shot them at 100. I don't have my long range dope out for those rounds. So that's why I shot that factory ammo. So if I'm shooting my hand loads and I know my dope really well out to 1,000 with those hand loads, I think I'm going to be more inclined to try some of those smaller targets. So that's one of my goals for next time, to be shooting all my own hand loads, ammo that I know really well, and have that dope very, very well established so that I can go in with confidence on my own ammunition. And if I need to roll more, I can roll more. And I'm not worried about the availability of factory ammo. And I'm also not worried about my rifle being zeroed for one type of ammo when I'm actually shooting another type for the competition and having to make that change the day of. So all that to say, I did come back with a general feeling of success. I was proud to have competed in this event. I had fun. It was a little bit stressful, but in a good way. It was a fun experience. I learned from it, and I want to go back. So I hope you enjoyed hearing the story. I hope if you're just a hunter out there, it encourages you to, there are a lot of other fun things that you can do in the shooting sports, whether that's USPSA pistol competition or these long-range sniper style match, or you want to just take a class, learn about shooting a carbine, or take a shotgun course, go out, shoot clays. There are a lot of other fun sports that you can do with a firearm, and this was a great reminder of that for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.